The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and Brew Bar.
Everything Sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Blade edition. We're talking Blade Trinity today. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, as always, your friend and mine, the vampire hunter himself, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hello, Tom.
What? You amateurs are supposed to be helping me? You? Look at you. You're kids. You're not ready to roll with this. I mean, look at the way you're dressed. What? That's supposed to be tactical? What is this? What is that? Fuck you? It's a joke, huh? What the fuck is wrong with y'all? Y'all think this is a joke? You think this is a fucking sitcom? Could not have put it better myself.
That
is a
so much to unpack.
Movie review.
Exactly.
I don't see how anyone could not agree with that.
Wesley Snipes stops to review the characters in the movie he's in.
I also, and Parker Posey does it later on in the movie as well. She tells everyone to stop saying "dick" so much.
Yeah,
which was exactly my note seconds earlier. So. Yeah, I mean...
What'd you say yesterday? 2 fucks and a dick in 11
right.
words?
Yeah, when a movie is giving itself notes, you feel like something has come apart at the seams, right?
Yes. Oh, that's amazing.
It really is. I hope that some of these are improvs as well, and it was just, because from
that's
what
one
I've
of my
heard,
notes. How much of this movie is improv?
Because Wesley Snipes did not have a good time on this movie.
Right.
Famously,
he was a pain in the ass on this movie.
And allegedly...
But now I'm kind of on his side.
Well, allegedly he tried to strangle David S. Goyer, right? That's the sort of the folklore. I don't know if that's been confirmed by either side.
Right.
But lines like that make me think that
he
the
earned
actors
it.
had the actors had a lot of rage. They had to sort of like find some way to communicate,
right?
To expel. And
it's
so
one thing. It's one thing to go up to a director and say, "Look, these lines, not great lines. Maybe we can do a little something." But when the director is the writer as well,
yeah, right,
you probably feel stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone in this movie feels stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing else to say.
Nothing more to add. All right,
nothing more to say.
Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about Blade Trinity, the last movie in the Blade series for now.
Pre-reboot.
Yeah.
That is definitely going to be a reboot, though, I'm sure.
Absolutely. This movie has 25% on Rotten Tomatoes, which feels high, and it's directed by.
It's high, but that's less than half than Blade 2 got.
Yeah.
So that's
on
in
par.
the right. That's in the right ballpark, but it's way too high. I would be talking, just making double digits, if that.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. It's directed by David S. Goyer, who we've mentioned before. Now, the only other movies I think he's directed are The Invisible and The Unborn. But as we said, he's got his paws all over everything in the writing category. The Dark Knight series, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Terminator Dark Fate, Jumper.
Okay.
This movie is a reason not to trust him with the Batman series. And yet they did.
Absolutely. or a reason that he could only do the Batman scene. Because that's
you might be
Marvel probably didn't want shit to do with him after this. That's my theory. That he would, he just walked out of the office saying, "Fine, if you don't want this kind of stuff, I'll take it to DC and destroy their credibility with it." Yeah,
That's great.
It is strange to have this kind of failure on your hands so early on in your directorial career. I don't know if you can call it that, but
right.
And sort of
because this movie is just a year before Batman Begins,
right? And then be entrusted with some of the biggest properties in Hollywood franchise cinema.
That's really remarkable. And it's funny because as maligned as this movie is, and as it should be, on a budget of $65 million, it didn't do much in the USA. Opening weekend 16.1 did not make its money back. In the USA, 52.4, which is usually the mark of you're not going to make these movies anymore. But in the world, it did make $131.9 million. So, it doubled its budget.
Yeah. But critically, it's
failure, right? Just, took a beating.
We've talked about this before. That if the prior sequel is good and has a good reputation, that can save the box office of the next one. The real test would have been if they made another movie.
Right, exactly.
Fared.
And they were circling another movie, from what I understand. Wesley Snipes wanted to do another one. They had ideas for crossovers.
So he could finish off David S. Goyer.
Yeah.
After his first attempted murder.
From what I understand, there were talks to do an underworld kind of crossover.
Well, I kind of, they're definitely responding to Underworld here, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They're responding to certainly that trend of action cinema.
Yes,
I think. So that doesn't surprise me at all.
It feels like more like one of those movies than it does a Blade movie.
And Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well.
Yeah.
Which would have
I
still
hadn't thought
been
of
on
that
at this time, or is it still been on at this time, or
2004?
Sure, it's wrapping.
If it is, it's towards the end. I want to say maybe it ended around 2005, but I don't. I could be very wrong.
But that's very It's all very superficially employed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's sort of interesting to like my first note is like the Marvel logo,
right?
And it's like 2 years after the last movie, we've already shifted how we're branding movies that come from Marvel Comics. We've already decided that's going to be our marquee for the movie, which I think is fascinating given everything that's happened since, where that logo has just become its own film, really.
Yeah.
Like every Marvel movie now begins with like a 2-minute version of that logo.
Yeah.
And every Marvel movie has what's going on in other Marvel movies.
I was surprised to see it so early.
Built into it. Yeah.
A version of it,
Right. And I think part of the albeit doomed project of this movie is to start building the language of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
In a very superficial and ultimately unsuccessful way.
Right.
But just they're it's like what does a Marvel movie look like? Like if you build it from the ground up. There's a lot
and
of
it's
that
kind
in
of
this movie.
because the first two movies were not connected to Marvel.
Right.
it feels like a hanger-on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it
it's,
feels. I mean, and in so many
Marvel
ways,
really doesn't start building until we get the first Iron Man,
right. It's. I mean, in many
as
ways,
we know it
feels like-
today.
yeah, it feels like a Blade adjacent movie.
Yeah.
It feels like you could be doing this with pretty much any of the Marvel characters. This story.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of like you've got Blade and you try and upstage him with Dracula is just weird.
Yeah, I know.
It's a really
Especially when you're
strange
calling him
choice.
Drake.
And when he's played by someone who looks like a boy band
A
reject.
not good actor.
He looks like a boy band reject or a failed pro wrestler.
I'll tell you what
And
he
he's
looks
wear-
like.
And he's wearing a corset for the majority of the movie.
Yeah, what he
also.
looks like is an Ed Hardy reject that would probably bathe in Drakkar Noir.
Right. It's
Like, it's just...
yeah. It's one of this movie's many staggering choices.
Yes.
But it comes out of the gate shitting on prior Dracula movies.
Yeah, right.
Which, if you're doing a
Under the
Dracula
guise
movie,
of lack of comedic timing, Ryan Reynolds.
right? Critics say, "Oh, it's always some, it's always a couple of English guys, making reference to Christopher Lee and the Hammer Cycle." I assume. It's like, well, that's what you're tapping into here. So why are you shitting on it?
Right.
Like in the first 10 seconds of the movie? But I'm also thinking, like, what? Dracula, really?
Yeah. That's
I mean,
one of my notes.
If you go on Netflix, the description, helpfully or unhelpfully, if for some reason it's going to be a nice surprise to you that Dracula's in the movie, it says, Blade combines with new allies to fight the ultimate foe, Dracula, and even when the movie started, I was like, that's got to be a mistake. I mean, these Netflix descriptions are very loose.
Yeah.
They can't really mean Dracula.
Yeah, that's that.
They're just using Dracula as a kind of umbrella term.
Well,
for
when I
vampires.
hear
Surely.
Ryan Reynolds say the word Dracula, my note is, we're not really doing Dracula, are we?
Yeah, and I'm both thinking we're really doing Dracula, and you're doing Dracula. Why are you shitting on Dracula?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what's this movie's position on Dracula?
Right.
Because it's clearly mixed feelings towards the idea. I mean, that's the weird thing about this movie, and the thing that is most curious and interesting about it, given that it's a complete and total failure,
Mm-hmm.
is that it feels like a movie that's fighting against itself sometimes.
Oh, completely.
Like it decides to do something.
It feels like it's dragging itself into directions that it doesn't itself want to go.
It decides to do something and then criticizes itself for doing it.
Right. Yeah.
It's like it's just like insecure, self-loathing movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing you can grab onto as something interesting and curious about it, because everything else fails.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like the Marvel thing, the Marvel logo up front is interesting because it immediately feels like a prototypical Marvel movie. It begins in the daytime with helicopters in the desert.
Right.
And I'm like, how many Marvel Avengers movies begin this way?
Exactly. And then you're seeing...
So already there's a brand new style that's evolving here.
Yeah. One of my notes is, are there non-pyramid pyramids in Syria?
Interesting.
That matte painting?
Right. Well, also...
And then we get disco Dracula?
Well, first of all, we get a series... we start with a series of bad choices. Like, we don't know who these people are, but they give the sun the finger, so I'm like, okay, that means they're vampires.
Yeah.
Probably a more nuanced way of telling us that, but I suppose it's clear. Strobe lighting,
Mm-hmm.
lots of CGI, and then, like, the first appearance of Dracula or Drake, who looks just like Skeletor from Masters of the
Yeah, he
Universe,
does.
as far as I could.
I wrote Disco Vampire Night
Yeah, I was like, this movie got hammy very quickly.
so quickly.
And the drop-off in directorial skill is evident.
It is clear.
If you're starting with strobe lighting, where have you got to go? Stylistically, right? But the moment, like the key moment where I knew this was David S. Goya's first film, or one of his first films, was as soon as we saw time-lapse photography.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. I was like, all right, yeah. This is exactly the kind of flash-in-the-pan cinematic trick that an early career director does. They literally... It's like, they can't just do it... They don't have the confidence to just do a transition.
Yeah.
They have to go, oh, hey, there's this trick I saw. There's this photographic trick I saw where you can speed everything up over time. Let's use that, like, every time we do a transition. It's like, you don't know what you're doing.
Right, yes.
A transition, just do a scene, any kind of scene transition is fine. You need to have the confidence to do that as a director.
Right.
Just go, yeah, the scene's starting, the scene's ending. That's it.
Well, and you also, you know, like I said in the last episode, we have 2 cold opens. Except the second cold open for this one, we add the credit sequence instead of, you know, doing like like in the last movie, we have a cold open, then we have Blade explains the last movie, Imbass, voiceover, followed by another cold open. This one, he's just sort of mashing it all together.
Right, and I think linking together the title sequence and a cold open, it ruins both of them.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes
right.
it impossible for both of them to be good. But I gotta tell, I mean, you know, I said that there was something televisual about the opening of Blade 2. This feels televisual, but like a sports promo.
Yeah.
This is like, if Blade was an athlete,
yes,
this is what this feels like. I half expected his stats to appear on the screen next to him.
It feels exactly like that. It feels, it you know those sort of Sunday morning football stories about big hits.
Yes.
About big hits. You know, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, and
before we realize that all of those hits give us brain damage and it can end up killing you.
Yeah, and then again, you know, we got the schlock factor is
on
11.
high.
We've got skulls flying towards the screen.
Yeah.
There's a flying man on fire. I mean, you know, almost Naked Gun levels of ridiculousness, of, you know, ridiculous violence. You know, it's so this movie comes in hot,
so hot, and then this movie announces its ineptitude, as we've already stated, quickly. But everything that we've talked about already compares very little to... I mean, you wouldn't know this because you haven't watched the first movie yet, but in that first movie, he's like sitting outside of a bar. And he's with the, you know, the main heroine. And he's sort of explaining vampires to her. And he's saying things like, so that guy's a vampire, he's a vampire, and this one over here's a vampire. And she says, how can you tell? And he says something like, you know, this is because of the way they smell, because of the way they move. And yet in this movie, he's faked out by 99-cent store vampire teeth.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
And it immediately just makes him irrelevant as a character almost.
Well, I had the note here, and this is a note for Del Toro as well. Someone should tell the directors of these movies that when everything turns out to be a fake out, it ruins the legitimacy of what you're seeing.
Right.
I mean, you talked about it in relation to Blade 2, like a 7-minute action sequence that is all a complete misunderstanding.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're pulling the same shit, you know, when it's all revealed to be part of a setup. It's like, well,
so that Parker Posey can have
all
her,
of what you've just
her video cam.
Yeah, all of what you've just showed me is now
null and void.
Null and void. But David S. It reminded me. I mean, this is the first time he's done this, but it reminded me of when David S. In the similar scene in The Dark Knight, where you believe that there's a legitimate there's a legitimate car chase going on with the Joker,
Right.
and then it's revealed that it's a setup,
It's
and
all
then you
part
get
of
the
a plan.
resurrection of Gary. Oh, yeah, it's all part of the plan, and I'm just like, it's like, why do they think this is a good narrative idea? Like, why? Like, it just delegitimizes what we've seen. It's almost like it's almost like you're sort of like, oh, we're only kidding.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but you were kidding for 20 minutes, and I believed in the stakes of this, and now.
And not just
I
that,
don't
but
expect
like
anything
how
to have
much could
stakes.
I mean, I'm speaking more specifically of Batman now, but how much could go wrong? Your plan is to just cause havoc for 20 minutes and then get caught.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Batman flips over a truck in that scene.
Right. Yeah. It's that I guess that's where Goyer and Nolan kind of dovetail.
I guess
They
in
like
that
to be
movie they're trading on the fact that Batman says he won't kill people, but when you flip over a truck, you're taking people's lives into your hands.
Right, they like to write in tricksy ways, but it's sort of it's deception for its own sake. It doesn't serve the ongoing story of the movie. And as you say, it's something of it's a real portrayal of the world we've established. Yeah. Because he gets conned by the easiest disguise that you could think of.
Right. He's supposed to be
also
better than that. It's all I'm saying.
He's supposed to, yeah. And we, speaking of fake outs, the movie sort of strongly suggests to us that we're going to get another Whistler Blade buddy comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the extent of it in this scene, really.
Yeah.
This and one more scene, and that's it.
All there is him saying...
The movie's lying to us on lots of levels.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
Right. So we get him back home after this car chase, and now... but it's funny, because my complaint in the last movie is you have no sense that there's a world outside of just vampires hunting each other. In this movie, you finally get a world. Like, the cops are coming, you see newspapers... You see them walking in the streets. You see that cops are after him now, and you see him arguing with Whistler about it. Whistler saying, "Hey, we don't do that. You're just killing people now." And he says, went bad. Like, don't care, don't give a shit. But Whistler's Whistler's complaints are immediately followed by him shooting cops.
Right. Well, yeah, they make the cops the villains of the piece very quickly, right?
Yeah.
I think just for the sake of inversion, just for the sake of Blade getting a new, different enemy, that it becomes the cops for a while. Before it becomes Dracula, that natural progression in a storyline.
Also. If you're a legitimately old man with knee problems, why would you hook up, say, 7 to 8 independently need to blow up computers? How about just hit one switch and they all blow up?
But we still need this. I had this note as well that this is another one of those kind of analog digital transition movies.
Yeah.
That where you see like a digital video hard drive,
right.
And you think, I don't know, maybe they don't have the capabilities to put it all on one computer yet. It's difficult to say. It's like we've broken the iPod barrier.
Yeah.
But we're still
dealing
in a little
with,
bit of a limbo.
With cassette tapes.
Yeah. And MP3s as well are mentioned.
Right.
So it's so we're kind of like we're sort of riding the we've begun a new phase of technology, but it's in its infancy.
Yeah, because at one point you see Whistler's daughter with like the huge kind of iPod with the giant wheel on it.
Yeah. In lieu of a personality, she makes playlists.
Yes, exactly. All right, well, once again, a good start. Why don't we stop here and then we'll come back?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
And then we'll get to Dracula.
Yeah.
We'll get to the Dracula part of this movie.
Boy, will we. All right.
Because the guy we saw at the beginning of the movie is Dracula. Not Skeletor.
Disco vampire
Which was my
night.
first guess.
We'll be right back, everybody.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing the last Blade movie, Blade Trinity, for better or worse, directed by David S. Goyer. I'm going to say worse. So...
Yeah, well, I mean, he wrote the last one.
He wrote all of them.
competently. Right, okay. Well, yeah, I obviously I can't speak for Blade, but Blade 2 was a competent script in many
Yeah.
ways. Not perfect, but solid and workmanlike. And this is like, this acts as if that quality is a bad thing in a script.
Right.
It's like, now I get to direct, I get to let loose from all these restrictions, like structure and dramatic act breaks. And
Yeah, right.
it's like,
Common sense. And so...
maybe yeah.
I mean, well, it's just right about now, because we've already had, in voiceover, a dose of Ryan Reynolds, and Blade, for whatever reason, just allows him... Blade, by the way, in this series, Blade gets caught a lot.
Yeah.
He's constantly getting caught.
Uh-huh.
Just seems
Yeah,
weird for
I
such a
mean,
capable daywalking vampire. But...
Well, he's sort of, yeah, it's like I guess the formula is like staying cool-headed in crisis.
That's what it
and
seems
how
like,
is he
yeah,
gonna-
exactly.
And then how is he going to escape is the sort of pleasure. But yeah, if he was as good as everyone says he is, he wouldn't get caught as much as he did.
I would have to say so. But he just allows himself to get caught by the cops, who also announce themselves, I think, as the FBI, right? James Remar?
Yeah.
Weird. Anyway,
Did you you watched this on Netflix, right?
yeah.
Did the scenes in the police the interrogation room look very cheap? Like, I don't know if Netflix got a bad copy of this movie, but it looked to me like, you know those movies from the early 2000s?
No, I
that,
think
like,
this
Lars
whole
von
movie
Trier-
looks cheap.
Okay, well, but for some reason in those scenes I was like, this looks like a Dogma movie. You know, one of those that Lars von Trier or Thomas Vinterberg, like, you know, filmed entirely on DV.
Yeah, right.
With no crew. And I'm thinking, that's probably not the look they're going for.
See, it's hard to
just
tell
looks
with
cheap.
Mr. Goyer.
Yeah, exactly. Um.
And also,
So yeah,
did you? So when Whistler, I forgot about this. When Whistler blows up, did you believe it?
Well, so so this is a good question because
Because I couldn't remember if he actually died.
well, clearly, I mean, but it makes you so you kill off a legacy character that was resurrected in the
Right.
last movie and was killed in the first movie. Is it worth resurrecting them? I mean, obviously it is because you get more Chris
Yeah.
Christopherson, but beyond that, there's no
But to kill him again,
to kill him again after sort of
and so early too.
establishing him as the co-lead of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And it just feels it feels disrespectful to say this movie's too old. We need the Scooby Gang to make this series relevant now. And they do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
For the series itself and render it anything but relevant.
Also, how much was that other scene with Whistler where with him and Blade in the Blade cave? How much is that just a scene from Dark Knight Rises?
I know, right?
I mean, I thought he was going to start I thought Whistler was going to start crying. It was so. It was like Goya just changed the name.
I won't bury you, Master Blade.
And then handed in the scene, for Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
Because that's it. They turn him basically his role in this movie is like a hick Alfred.
Right.
And that's and then he gets blown up. After putting his we see him put his ring on, right? Or no, we see. Is he looking at his ring?
I forget.
I have a note here that says the ring.
Yeah.
So.
Because I remember it's the last movie, isn't it? When he licks his finger and gets the ring back on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the significance of it's the ring in the first movie? It's just his wedding ring, right?
It's just his wedding ring. I seem to remember him. What I remember is him saying that. I can't. Maybe he's explaining to the woman. I don't know, but like he's. I remember him saying his family was dead, so it's very strange to have a daughter show up in this movie.
But but they obviously show him. I don't know what he is looking at the ring or whatever. I've got the note here, so he must make a point of the ring at some point. That in their head that makes it easier for us to take the fact that his daughter's going to turn up later in the movie.
I guess, but
But what you're saying is that ring means his family's dead.
Yeah.
So it should make it less.
Yeah, exactly.
It should make it less easy for us to take.
The other thing is, because
it's like, don't remind us of the ring,
right? At all, because the thing that strikes me as hollow about this movie is these are some of the first grown-up roles for Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds. Like, it feels like this was supposed to be their coming out party where they got buff for a role and did a lot of training. To her credit, I read something about she broke a $300,000 camera because the director told her to aim her arrow directly at the camera's lens, and it was covered by a plexiglass except for a small square. And she was so good with her bow and arrow at this point that from 50 feet, she thought she shot it right through that hole and into the camera lens.
We're not getting any evidence that our original assumption about David S. Goyer is that's up there with the BTS story about Harold Ramis looking into the wrong end of the camera when he was directing Caddyshack on his first day. I mean, aim it right at the camera. Everyone around him's like,
turn that thing around.
Yeah,
genius.
It's covered in plexiglass. Yeah, okay, but let's just. Surely someone must have been like, I was like, let's just avoid aiming things at cameras.
Just generally.
Because we kind of need those to film the movie. Yeah, it's well. I mean, her entrance is great. Like, if they had built on, she has such a badass entrance to the movie, and it gave me like a moment of, I thought, because I basically thought at that point, if the baby had been real, this movie's over.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
if this is a real baby, this movie's done. And the fact that it turned out to be a fake baby, which in my head was like, that's what I would have done.
Yeah.
With this, I was like, and then she has, you know, a decent action moment. I was like, that's a great entrance.
Although with too much slow motion.
Well, I'm gonna. Yeah,
aside from that.
Aside from that, and aside from the terrible, the train goes past and she disappears, which I just don't want to see again in any movie. And again, speaks to Goya's inexperience as a director. But at that point, I'm sort of thinking, okay, we can build on this. Mm-hmm. That's a good action heroine entrance. Yeah. Let's build on that. The movie does nothing to build on that.
It puts her in the back seat, literally.
And then we have a real baby later in the movie.
Right.
So it just shows that this is just a prelude to having a real baby.
Learn no lessons.
Learn no lessons, and in fact, unlearns its own lesson. And then they're like, ah, God, a real baby's not enough. We got to have a kid as well. Yeah. It's like David S. Goyer. It's like, how many sentimental shortcuts do you need in one movie? So, I mean, it's interesting that like in this early portion of the movie, we get two of the cast members of Best in Show.
So this was my next.
Oh no, not just all of the Christopher Guest mockumentaries.
Yeah, exactly. But that was one of the things I was going to ask you was about. I wanted to ask you about John Michael Higgins,
right?
And his showing up in this movie, like, kind of doing his thing, but not really, because he's also being malevolent.
Well, I mean, it's you watch them, you watch both.
But it's one of the problems with this movie is tone.
Well, you watch both him and Parker Posey, and you think they're giving it their all.
Yeah,
but they're not quite right. They shouldn't be here.
No, Parker Posey to me fits better than he does.
Yeah, but she's sort of working. I don't know. Is that? I feel like we've said this before about Parker Posey. She's sort of working against some of her strengths, and so is John Michael Higgins. But
when we did the when we finally caught up and did Superman Returns,
yeah,
we kept saying, you have this great actor. She'd be a great Lois Lane, you know?
I think she'd also be a great Dracula.
Yeah, exactly. Get Dominic Purcell the fuck out of there.
And this movie gives us no reason to think that Dracula can't be a woman.
Right.
Because Dracula can be fucking anything.
No mist, no wolves, but people change? Yeah, probably.
Well, that's it, yeah. So, I think, like, there's a better role for her in this movie. But I thought it was just weird. They had this psychiatrist figure in who's sort of making fun of the sort of vampire sex analogy to Blade's face.
Right.
And again, I'm thinking...
But, like, also right in...
Why are you shitting on the vampire genre? Like, this is your bread and butter.
You've given yourself over to them.
Right. Like, what... It's like, oh, you know, it's sort of vampirism is just like, you know, everyone just does it as a you know, it's just vicarious sexuality expressed through vampirism. It's like, yeah, that's what these movies are about. You're one of these movies. Stop telling us not to watch you.
You're in the middle of one of the movies.
Oh, and it's just, and the fact that, you know, Parker Posey ends up just going full dominatrix makes me think that, well, yeah, but you have a sexual metaphor in this movie to do with vampirism.
Sure.
So why would you point out how, you know, contrived it is? before you
Right.
actually do it. Again, it's talking itself out of and into what it wants to do
Like
all the time.
constantly.
It's a weird script. And again, it's like we find out someone we didn't think was a familiar is a familiar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tiresome game to keep playing. And then, and then you fuck John Michael Higgins' character, basically. Because all he is now is an evil henchman.
Right.
So he doesn't even need to be a psychiatrist. He could be anything.
Well, and they're going to kill him 10 minutes later anyway, so it doesn't matter.
That's true. So, do you know... You started talking about Ryan Reynolds, and I interrupted you, but... So he fires through the window, and they go, Hannibal King!
I know. So you assume that he's known, like from the first movie?
Yeah, would he be... Do you think he'd be... do you know if he's known to the comic book readers, or he's a character outside, like a Marvel Universe character?
Don't know.
Or who... No. But this movie certainly thinks you'll recognize the name.
This movie seems to think that Hannibal King is Deadpool. Like, that's what they make it seem like.
He's a jokester from the start,
Also...
And then we have possibly the weirdest moment in the movie, to me.
Which one?
Where, well, Wesley Snipes breaks out of his chains.
Yes.
King Kong style.
I know.
Roars, and has a giant boner. And, now, my question to you is his ability to be erect ever... Is the powerfulness of his erection ever mentioned before?
No.
In the Blade series. Okay, so this is straight up race. You add that to the Kong roaring, that's just straight up racism, then, right? I mean, it's like, but why? And how did anyone let this happen in 2004?
It's hard to say.
And is it a joke? Is it like...
That's the thing, is like...
He's woken up, so he's got a boner? Is that... Well, I mean, what... Also,
Do you think
the
it was a
byproduct
mistake?
of this is it's very racist, but the intent... But I don't even know what the intention was supposed to be.
Do you think it could have been a mistake?
Not because... Well, it's right. It's like in my face.
Yeah, but could it...
The tip is on the edge of my nose.
Like, was he hiding a weapon? And I don't mean that...
No, I know. I mean,
literally.
that's it. I kept expecting there to be some sort of follow-up, but it was just like, there's Wesley Snipes' penis, which is apparently erect.
Fuck.
I mean, it's... Yeah, it's like... And, from nowhere has his sexual prowess been discussed in the movies I've seen of the Blade series. So...
But I also started asking myself other questions, like, how did the Scooby Gang get into a government building
Yeah.
so easily?
And also, what you say Scooby Gang, and that's a good description. I've got it down here because of David S. Goyer. I think there's a Robin and Batgirl vibe.
Yeah,
as well.
that's true.
Especially as Abigail is Whistler's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and given that they've established Whistler as Alfred. And yeah, it's like a brand new team of allies.
Yeah.
For every movie, which is, I guess it works depending on the allies.
Sure.
But here, it's you've got an impasse of it's someone's relative.
Yeah, right. Big impasse.
So it's a relative.
But
surrogate.
it has that thing. It has that sort of Beneath the Planet of the Apes thing where you have a surrogate to replace a person who's in the movie. You had him and decided to blow him up at about minute 12.
And continues to be in the movie. And continues to be in the movie.
Yeah, even after he dies. You're right.
Dracula shenanigans. What? So, so both the one of the big problems I have with both the team of villains and the team of allies is that they look boring.
Yeah.
They look like they've not been thought through as an ensemble. And to me, the one that really stands out, and I think you know him he's a wrestler, right? Preparation H, or what's his name? I don't know. I literally can't remember.
Triple H.
Okay, Triple H. I refer to him as Atkins Chris Farley. And he's the worst of a very bland bunch of vampire foes. That seem like they're like central casting. And even when we get into the lab and we introduced, I mean, not that the
but
actors
before that, I got some big problems with exactly how inept David S. Goyer comes across as at the end of this rescue scene, because they leave the building, the cops surround the building in theory.
Mm-hmm.
They decide to just run away. So you have like 100 cops shooting at them. And of course they just miss. And they just go to their cars to the left of the building and drive away. And the cops just don't follow. It happens at the beginning of the movie too, where Blade gets into his car after he shoots the human and just drives away. The cop and the helicopter just stay there on the body. No cops go chase the car. The helicopter doesn't follow the car. All cops in this movie just stop at the location of where it happened. And then Triple H, he does this weird thing, David S. Goyer, where he has Triple H running after them, but he does that speed up fast motion thing. But like for the sake of comedy. It looks like Benny Hill.
like they use it in The Ice Pirates.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's just speed it up because it's funny. As Homer Simpson said, people like movies at double the speed because it's funny. Yeah, okay. I mean, I hadn't necessarily noticed that, but it's another black mark against the film.
Well, the biggest black mark to me is when we finally get the Scooby Gang back and we introduce the Scooby Gang. At some point, Ryan Reynolds is going to talk about where they found Dracula. Do you remember where they said he was? Where he said he was?
What, pre-Syria?
So he said
Iraq.
He said,
right? Yeah.
He said Iraq. But the beginning of the movie says they're in Syria.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I remember reading something that said at first they were going to do Iraq, and then they decided, I think because of the time this movie was made, too politically charged, so we'll make it Syria. But he left in a take in which a character says Iraq.
Wow.
That's fucking something else.
That's a whole load of ineptitude. That's right. Wow. Norman Reedus has been split into Patton Oswalt and Natasha Lyonne. Which, to be fair, is about right. I think if you merge those two together, you get Norman Reedus.
Sure.
It's really, I mean, this is where we get to the quotable from the beginning of this episode. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing to me, like, how
there's a lot of talent.
Well, how
in this
dead
movie.
on Blade's speech is about how this movie has got everything wrong with regards to style and casting, and that it's got the worst tendencies of a certain generation of filmmaker and fan.
Mm-hmm.
But he's saying it in the movie. And he also says that they sound, it sounds like rejects from a Saturday morning cartoon. Right. And I'm like, yeah, this is the kids' cartoon version of Blade.
Of this movie.
In fact, there's a kids' cartoon, you probably don't know it, not having a small child in the house. PBS's Wild Kratts. You know of this show?
No.
The Kratt brothers, who are like nature guys, they have like a superhero cartoon. Right. And I could not help thinking of that. Like, there's there's like like that when you see the villains all together and when you see the allies all together, it's like this is Wildcrats. This is what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
This whole show, like more than any grown-up media I've ever seen, this is like an episode of PBS's Wildcrats.
Right.
And
well, you know what's funny is that
I mean, you said Scooby Gang and
Yeah.
you know Batgirl, Rob. It's part of the same problem.
it's all just
Hard to take
occurring to
seriously.
me now too that this movie, because all three of these movies are rated R, but this movie almost feels like the movie that they decided to try to make PG-13
Yeah.
and make more accessible,
Mm-hmm.
which is strange considering it's rated R and like they didn't do that. But
Oh, well, and the amount of swearing in it as well.
yeah,
Like, I think you'd probably get away with this as a PG-13 movie if it didn't have so much swearing in it.
right,
Like
exactly.
Deadpool levels of swearing. Yeah. It's just it's fascinating. And here we get, there's a they hand Blade a Dracula comic book
I know.
and he throws it
And
away.
just with disdain, he throws it away. Like,
right. Which again is sort of like
Dracula's fucking stupid. Shut up.
right. It's sort of like, so wait, so you're a graphic novel adaptation doing a Dracula storyline, and you're embarrassed both about being a Dracula movie and about being part of a graphic novel cycle.
Yeah.
Should you be the people? You're probably not the right people to make this movie. But here we find out that it's now they call him Drake.
Drake.
Which again is
And
like
literally
it's trying to
the focal point, like the vampire that started vampires,
yeah.
they decide to cast Dominic Purcell, who, like I stated earlier, I mean, he looks like an Ed Hardy nightmare.
Hmm.
Except
But
when he's
like
dressed like Skeletor in Masters of the Universe.
No one forced them to go down the Dracula route.
Right.
That was their choice.
I know.
And now, but they seem nothing but wary of aligning themselves with Dracula fiction.
Including like who they cast and how they dress him.
Yeah, and
He does not present himself as a formidable foe.
but
He
it's
looks
really
ridiculous.
like they're constantly trying to distance themselves from Dracula mythology. At one point, said nobody really knows the specifics of his origins.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bram Stoker would disagree with you there. I seem to remember he wrote a whole book about Dracula's origins. And what showed me that they have a fundamental misunderstanding of what Dracula is in fiction. I think it's Ryan Reynolds who says, there's again shitting on Dracula movies.
Right.
Says there's no happy ending with this guy. Like happy endings are not part.
It's not
of the
really
Dracula
part of the
format
of the canon.
Okay? It's like, yeah, he gets, it's sort of like stake through the heart, he burns down, some people don't die. It's not happy ending. I mean, like, why would you make that distinction? Oh, and yeah, and I mean, to your point about like, it makes no attempt to build on the Dracula archetype that we know or do anything interesting
Right.
with it. In the last movie we had vampire goes into a blood bank. Here we have Dracula goes into a goth store,
Yeah, right.
which is too specific on either end
Mhm.
as a joke. And then he goes and he looks at all the fake teeth and by the way, the fake teeth that apparently fooled Blade at the beginning of this movie.
Right.
And all the Dracula stuff, and it's like, what's your point here?
That's the thing, is that they don't have a point.
If Dracula came back and he was all commercialized, like, yeah, Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
they don't have a point, and this movie is so much. The funny thing is that this movie seems to make a deliberate choice to have more style over substance, except the style sucks.
Yeah, it's really
I
interesting
mean,
to me. They spent
you mentioned Dracula uh, throwing that real baby.
throwing the real
When he
baby.
throws the real baby, my note is that that Blade must say to himself, "I always do a flip when I save a baby."
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He's like flipping through the air,
Yeah.
doing a somersault midair to save the baby.
Yeah.
Is that necessary? Like,
No.
David S. Goyer just thinks it looks cool.
Right. And also, speaking about style over substance, they go on the attack after, Hammer Dracula movies.
Yeah.
But there's a line in this movie that reads, "We need Dracula's blood,"
Yeah.
which sounds like a title of a late Hammer horror
Sure.
Dracula adaptation. So don't tell me you're different when you have lines like that in your movie.
That's great.
You chose this path, and this it's the path you've gone down. Patton Oswalt plays a fanboy scientist.
Yep.
Which, again, something I never need to see again in a movie. Right? It's really interesting. Like, this is the beginning, isn't it, of like characters in franchise movies. There has to be like some representation of the fandom in there as a character.
Yeah.
And you go a couple of years back to Blade 2. And, the equivalent here is Scud. And Scud is just a guy who fixes things.
Yeah.
It's like, that's all you need.
That's
right?
all you
It's
want.
Like, that's all you want. It's like, I don't need him to have any relationship to the public perception of Blade.
Yeah.
It's like, keep the fandom outside the movie. And we'll all be
perfect.
happy.
All right, let's take another break.
All right.
And we'll come back. We'll finish up this sloppy mess of a third act of a movie. All right, everyone. We'll be right back.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here finishing up with Blade Trinity. The lesser of the Blade movies.
The lesser spotted Blade.
Yeah. We've talked about, we've been, comparing these movies to movies of their time. And I think narratively we're right at the point where, like, out of nowhere, all of a sudden this story goes into, hey, they're farming blood.
Yeah,
and if anything ever reminded me of The Matrix,
yes,
it was this.
I was like,
nonsense.
My exact note was that clearly this movie hasn't forgotten about the Matrix.
It's got a fetish.
But also Del Toro must have remembered this when he did The Strain, because there's the same they do a blood farm storyline on The Strain.
Is that right?
As well. So
and it's like, again, there's some
he even retrospectively he was able to mine the potential of this movie.
Yeah. But it goes back to what we've been saying all along, the ineptitude of Goyer, because you have this, I mean, visually it looks okay. It's interesting the way the
blood farm. Yeah, the blood farm looks great.
The way the bodies are hung up and all of that.
Uh-huh. Like vacuum.
Yeah, vacuum sealed. They've all been sous vide. But what I found amazing was
that meat must be so tender.
Yeah. So they attack some people outside. They bring the cop. For whatever reason, this cop familiar knows about the farms. Mm-hmm. And they bring him inside, and I think they beat him up. But it looks like it's a completely empty factory of farms. There's no establishing shot whatsoever, and all of a sudden, Blade just turns around, and there's like a tech woman at a computer.
Yeah.
And he says, "Shut it all down."
Yeah.
It's remarkably inept.
It reminds me of that great scene from Ed Wood where, the actor asks, "Where's the cockpit?" And it's like, "You're sitting in it." It's that kind of.
Right.
I'm sure there was a similar conversation. It's like, when do we get to the blood farm? Oh no, right here.
Oh yeah, just look up
this console.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, but what about the rest of it? Nah, no one's gonna care about that. Everyone's gonna be looking at the blood.
Yeah.
No one's gonna be looking at what's behind it, except two guys on a podcast.
We'll just have one person, a scientist lady, just sitting there. She just sits with the bodies. Yeah. Morning to night.
Now, did you pick up? Speaking of like establishing shots, did you pick up on? It may be hard for you to remember because I assume you've seen this movie before.
Mm-hmm.
Did you remember that Summerfield was blind? I mean, did you clock that until she started reading Braille?
No.
I just thought she was wearing sunglasses inside, like a cool person.
A cool person. That's what I thought.
Or like what Larry David says, the only people who wear shades inside the only people who wear shades inside blind people and assholes. That's it. So I guess it's one of those two.
Right.
And we should have known. But I was just like, oh, she's blind.
Well, and not just that, but it's like,
and now her blindness means everything.
Right. Because at one point, it's like she's manning the security cameras. They show her in front of the security screens,
right,
as the all the vampires are attacking, and she just can't see.
Yeah, well, it's like Ray Charles flying a plane,
Right.
It's like good for him, but would you be a passenger? So, yeah, and I was like, okay, so she's blind, and now she's being used as part of a CCTV-based plot point.
Mm-hmm.
And
I can't remember, because all I knew was, I couldn't remember, I did remember. I in my mind, I was like, please tell me Ryan Reynolds is dead. And then I thought, I really don't think he is. I believe they capture him. But for what purpose?
They even want you to believe... They want you to believe that Whistler's still alive for a second, when it's obvious that it's Dracula shapeshifting.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And also here's the level of ineptitude here. Dracula appearing as Whistler is not necessary because there's a blind person manning the security camera, so he can just walk through as Dracula if he wanted to. And the only person who that would have any effect on is Abigail.
Right.
Who is not the person he kills.
Right.
Who has no contact with the Whistler version of Dracula.
She's off with Blade.
Right. And I was like I thought at one point that Abigail was going to come back into the scene, she would be fooled into thinking Whistler was there. They'd have a scene between them. That would be the drama. But no, she just finds Natasha Lynn's body.
Yeah.
So why is he reanimated? Why have we resurrected Whistler once again when you're not even doing the plot point that you could do with that? And the only one that makes sense. It's very strange.
Well, to say the least.
And you know, then we get to the Ryan Reynolds in captivity scene, which is just 13-year-old dialogue.
Nonsense.
In a room full of idiots.
Such nonsense. I have a note here.
How are we supposed to take anything seriously? Everything is a joke. Literally everything is a joke. There's no sense of... Every time Ryan Reynolds opens his mouth, he's comedically commenting on the action. He does nothing. He's like a cross between Rodney Dangerfield and Rick Ollier from The Phantom Menace. He's narrating the movie in comedy.
But, like we said, with no comic timing.
With no comic timing and no material. No good material either.
And then the Scooby Gang's going to attack. One of my notes is because Triple H is in the room with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
And then my note is, when you hire a wrestler, wrestling things are going to happen.
I didn't even know he was a wrestler. That shows me how much actual wrestling he's employing in this movie. There's I think in one of the weirdest scenes in a movie full of weird scenes for me, which also makes me think that David S. Goyer was enrolled in some kind of film director's class. And he understood what he needed to do, but no one had given him the note that he needed to do it differently, is where Abigail just starts doing archery practice.
Yeah.
On a target board.
Target.
That's it. That's the whole scene.
Right.
And it's no better or worse than just watching archery. And
also,
I can just imagine
to show any particular skill because the arrows are kind of all over the place.
It doesn't even do the very minimal job it's supposed to do. But I can just imagine like his teacher in the class sitting him down and saying, "Now I understand why you put this in here, because this is foreshadowing what's going to come up. But you don't need to do that. We can just see it, or you could do something with stakes in this scene."
Right.
It's a live target or something. Listen, I could just imagine. And he's like, yeah. And David S. Goyer, yeah, I have no idea why I put that in there.
Yeah,
I mean, it made sense. It made sense because it's the next thing we're going to see.
It made sense when I did it.
Yeah.
And I just liked the shot selection. I thought it looked really good. Yeah, but do you see the haphazard way all the arrows are in the target? It doesn't even show skill, David.
I can't believe I was just for a few minutes I'm just watching archery. It's really weird. And then we get this kind of suddenly the virus is a threat to Blade. So
out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, we go from no stakes to the stakes are higher than we thought, because the solution to the narrative problem could also kill him.
We don't know what's going to happen to you. Sorry.
Yeah. Drake seems to talk in John Lennon songs. When he's talking to the little girl.
I know.
Doesn't he say, "Imagine there's no God," or something like that?
Well, I think he just says there is no God.
I think he says, "Imagine there is no God."
Really?
I really think he does. And also, so for a vampire movie, they've not even done the basic amount of research. It's without God, there's no vampires. That's
yeah, right.
It's without sweet, there is no concept of salty. I mean, it's just and for a movie that is kind of contending that he's some kind of atheist vampire, that only vampires exist and the rest of the world is just science.
Mm-hmm.
Given that that's what they're plugging, he looks an awful lot like the devil when you see him in his natural form.
Right, exactly. My note was, he turns into his true form and gives horny toad headbutts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can't
And that
fail.
fight, by the way, is super anticlimactic. Again,
Yeah,
Drake not doesn't live up to the billing as Dracula,
right.
you know?
And yeah, again, like all they've got in their arsenal of what's new with Dracula is that he flies now. It's the
Mhm.
J.J. Abrams rule of when you're out of ideas, make them fly. And that's what we have. Except, I guess Dracula can by his very nature can fly. He can turn into whatever the fuck he wants. So
Right.
again, if you know the mythology, not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But this movie is
And
obviously
also, I mean, it's funny because I felt like I was given the impression by Natasha Lyonne that you stick Dracula with this,
Mm.
and it wasn't going to be like COVID. It wasn't a virus that like he just kind of coughed out into the air.
Yeah.
To me, it was like all vampires at that moment were going to die. But
Yeah.
by the end of this movie, it's like, well, no, just the vampires in the building
Right. Yeah.
who were exposed.
Mm-hmm.
So Blade still has a job.
Hopefully.
But they made it seem like he was not going to have a job at the end of this.
Yeah. Yeah. When was X-Men 3 or whatever that's called? X-Men the Final,
Last Stand?
the one with Kelsey Grammer and Vinnie Jones.
I thought that wasn't number 2.
Vinnie Jones is not in X-Men 2, for God's sake. That movie had some self-respect.
You're right. I want to say 2006.
Because wasn't that? I mean, that's one of the big.
The Last Stand, I mean.
Yeah, that was one of the kind of most criticized elements is that they un-X-Men them all.
Yeah.
So maybe they just wanted to have it both ways. Of like, as like Blade, like you said, Blade can still have a job, but we take care of the vampires
Right.
at hand, but we don't destroy all the vampires. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It does make it sound like that. What do you think? I mean, we see the double vampires again in the shape of a small dog.
Yeah. And two big dogs.
And then two big dogs. Yeah, why? You've already revealed the true evil of small dogs. Why do we have to stereotype Rottweilers into the mix?
I know, right?
I just fucking hate this. And yeah, so like the title sequence, we get way too much intercutting between what Ryan Reynolds is doing in his comedy action extravaganza and Blade versus Dracula, that neither sequence can survive on its own.
Yeah, the movie seems to kind of...
By the way, Blade versus Dracula is the movie they want to make. They just think they're above it.
Yeah, exactly. The movie kind of sets it up like it's almost Silverado, where everybody has to take on their foe at the end.
Yeah.
Except Ryan Reynolds ends up taking on both Triple H and Parker Posey, while Jessica Biel is just randomly shooting, randos.
By the way, it's not. We're not skipping over what Jessica Biel has done in this movie. Literally, the last thing we said about her entrance is the last thing she did.
Yeah.
Entrance archery, this. There is no place for her in this movie.
Yeah.
We're not missing anything else.
Which again shows such ineptitude, because she has to be the new Whistler because she's a Whistler.
Right.
Fuck's sake.
And then
but they try to make up for it by, like, she has to shoot the arrow that goes into him, but she doesn't even do that right.
After all that practice, she should have. Yeah. She should have maybe used something. He saw her coming a mile easy away. To hit.
Luckily, he dropped it right next to Blade.
Right. They really think that skeletal armor looks good, don't they?
They do.
And it looks like a sub Frank Langella Skeletor is what it looks like.
And then they have this stupid platitude, where Drake is telling, Blade that he's an honorable warrior. Ugh.
Right, which again is like, they, again, for a movie that is resistant to aligning itself with the Dracula cycle, is definitely a trait of the Dracula cycle, that at some point he becomes an honorable anti-hero figure, a la Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
First of all, you need a better actor to do that.
Much.
Second of all, it's kind of meaningless in the context of the story coming this late.
Yeah.
I also think, like, just to add injury to insult to injury.
Right. Yeah.
Times a million. We do like a CSI style virus going into the blood. And I'm just like, they're literally doing that because that's what you do at this time in TV.
In TV and film,
in TV
right.
medical shows. That's literally it. And again, it just cheapens the movie. It makes it look like a TV movie or a TV procedural.
Yeah, but the whole movie looks cheap anyway, so at this point, in the last 2 minutes of the film, it doesn't matter.
Why the fuck does that cityscape look so fake?
I know.
Could we not just have filmed a city?
Right?
Is it all, like, computer generated?
It looks like it.
If you're going to do that kind of pan across a landscape, why wouldn't you use real buildings? Or just don't do that shot, do something else.
And Drake, I assume, became half-naked Blade to allow Blade some time to get away from the cops? That's his last gift?
That's his gift, yes.
Doesn't seem like a gift kind of a guy.
No, and when you need a Ryan Reynolds voiceover to tell us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and why are we listening to Ryan Reynolds throughout this movie? Why are we not listening to Blade?
Not throughout this movie, only at the beginning and the end.
That's true. But
it's
still.
One of those. I didn't even think we were going to get to the end.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah, he's the narrator. I've seen a draft of the script where it was Abigail who was narrating the movie, which makes way more sense.
Way more sense.
But also,
also bad. Just let Blade do it.
Let Blade do it, or don't do it all in dialogue. We get at the ending of the movie is another sort of bullshit Terminator style, let's keep our sequel options open ending. Mm-hmm. Isn't it something like, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's like the war raves on or whatever.
Everyone knows the war doesn't end, is what he says.
No, they actually say that?
Yeah.
That's basically what they say at the end of Terminator Salvation.
Yeah. Everyone knows the war doesn't end.
Christian Bale's The War Raises On.
But the biggest problem with that is I kept saying to myself, I thought the war was supposed to end. I thought killing him killed all the vampires.
But that made me really prefer that weird comic button at the end of the last movie. It's like, that's much, at least that resolves something.
Right.
And then, the titles were televisual. My God, the credits are even worse. The credits look like the end of a soap opera. And then it keeps breaking. Well, I guess we're into credit check there, so I should pause and ask.
By all means,
if there's any more to add from you about the movie.
No.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
I'm
fine.
So we get
except that this movie's frustrating.
It's very frustrating.
It's a frustrating movie to watch.
It is.
Because, as we've said many times, when you go and see any movie, you want to feel like you're in good hands, and you never feel like that watching this movie. Not for a second.
It's really interesting because David S. Goyer is this kind of enigma that you don't quite know what he brings to a project.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not always good. And it's really interesting that a lot of the problems in this movie he sort of shipped out to DC.
Yeah.
Let DC stumble with it. But then Marvel, without his influence, just kind of fucking goes from strength to strength.
Right.
It's really interesting. And it's like certain people came along and certain people, I mean Jon Favreau, because that's who always solves these problems.
Right.
Came along and were like, "Oh no, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
I've solved all these problems." And they were like, and then they've been making the same movie for like 15 years,
right,
based on this one template. But here you've got like the raw materials without any of the massaging you need to put them in the right.
See, but there's an extra component to it that's interesting to me, because you cannot assail, like, the Batman, the Nolan Batmans are thought of in such high regard.
Yeah.
That,
Well, again, it's the same thing as Blade, isn't it? The first two movie, I mean, for us, not for anyone
Well,
else,
that's what I mean. Like, we're the minority. I've
Yeah.
said this to other people since we've done our Nolan Batman series.
Yeah.
And I tell people, go back and watch that movie.
Mm.
I was afraid to say that it's not good, and it's not good.
There was
they thought I was full of shit.
Well, there are some unpleasant YouTube comments that speak to that on that Dark Knight Rises episode, which I won't share. I won't give that the oxygen of publicity.
All right.
But it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? The first two movies, it reaches a peak, and then the third movie kind of destroys itself.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a way worse movie.
I was just gonna say, this is so much worse than.
But it's just like I like to try and figure out what is Goyerizing.
Yeah, exactly.
In cinema, and part of it is like, you've made all the ingredients work together, and then you forgot the recipe.
Right.
There seems to be a big part of it, of his method.
Interesting.
It's how you end up with Batman versus Superman and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, well, I'll go into credit check.
Yeah,
then.
credit check us.
Do you think these are actual images from the comics? Or just made to look like they are?
Yeah, I don't know.
Potentially, my suspicion is that these are not actual images from the comics.
I don't think so.
It's like they've just done like a aha, take on me kind of version of the movie. Something I noticed that we see in like every movie since, every big like franchise movie since, no one effects house did more than one sequence.
Yeah, right.
And so this is the beginnings of completely contrary special effects. Like one movie has a myriad of different effects. No one looks like the other.
Right.
And that's very clear here. Although there is a general air of shitness about them, that links them all together. RZA did the soundtrack.
Yeah, I saw that actually.
Which is sort of interesting. I think there's a lot of road testing of Kill Bill here. Particularly, there's that one kind of Velvet Underground remix it does when Dracula in his low-cut t-shirt and leather coat is walking through a time-lapse street.
Right.
And then the music is what's the song? Shiny Boots, Kinky Boots remixed.
I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy.
Okay. But anyway, like some good people involved on the music side of this movie as well.
I get excited when you say things about music and I recognize it. Because it doesn't happen often.
After the credits have rolled...
The word?
What comes up, yeah. Just as word. So instead of ending on like a solid joke or, something profound, they decided to end on a piece of slang that dates the movie horribly.
Like, and
might as well have
I kept saying to myself, is this what they're going for? Are they going for the slang? Are they going for word?
Yeah. Well, what else could it
Man.
be?
That's
I mean,
up there with...
They might as well have just put, like, cowabunga or something like that, right? For all it matters. It'll date us badly.
Yeah, because to me,
did...
that was like evil Jack Frost level nonsense.
Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't believe it.
But that's not the
It's
end.
my last note. Word, question mark. What the
Well,
fuck?
beyond that, we have the like a nod to the post-credit sting, which will be in every Marvel movie since.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't know if I'm missing something, but there is no content or information here.
No.
It's just him driving in a car.
Just driving.
So you can see that you can see that they might want to start doing that. But they haven't figured out that it's a place to drop new information.
Right.
They see it as like, I don't know, maybe that's what...
I think it's literally to convince the audience, hey, don't worry, he still has work to do. All the vampires aren't dead.
But we already saw that. He was already, like, driving away on his bike. Well, it's your fault. You didn't make this movie. It's your fault. Okay, well, I'm glad I'm not missing something. Like, I don't know, so, he's got different shades, and that means that,
Right.
Joey Badonga's gonna be in the next movie, or,
Yeah.
But, but also to, like, see where that tradition has gone since then. Where it's like someone brand new comes in and tells you what's going to be in the next movie, or what's going to be in a TV series that you have to watch on Disney Plus or something like it's like that's big real estate now, and here it is really just a do 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 driving around do 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 do. So it's like, it's weird to me that they figured out that they want to do this, but have no content.
But
to
not
put
how.
in there.
Yeah.
They should have just Ferris Bueller'd it for all it matters. It should have
That's
just been
great.
Blake going, "Go the fuck home." Actually, how fucking great would have that been if he just got out, he was like in his pajamas, wakes up and just goes, "Go the fuck home."
Oh, that's amazing.
That's
all
all
right.
I had. That's it.
I think that's all that's fit to print, my friend. We did it.
Well, I wasn't even fit to print.
Yeah, that's true. You got me there. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think of Blade Trinity? Are you on our side, or are you an unabashed fan? Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter to let us know. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. We will read it on air. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. When you hear us next, we'll be pitching sequels. Say goodbye, Tom.
Coochie coo. I'm embarrassed for Wesley Snipes that he had to do that.
Yes.
But given that he probably had no choice but to do that, because it's a movie full of jokes, that he was going to have to do one, I'm really glad that was the one he had to do, because he sort of nails the delivery on that.
He does the best he can with it, for sure.
And he's like,
that's after his flip.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it, but he still comes out glowing in this movie. Like, no aspect of his characterization is affected by this movie, which is saying something.
He's the one thing that isn't bad.
This movie, because this movie
him and Chris Christopherson, but sadly they kill him.
Yeah, this movie wants to rip him apart conceptually, and he's just not.
And
having any of it.
They can't do it.
They can't do it. No,
you're right. All right. Well, stay tuned, everyone. We got sequels we're going to be pitching coming at you next.
We got sequels. It's like it's like the opening number of our musical.
Yeah.
Of Everything Sequel.
We got sequels.
We got sequels. Ripe strawberries, ripe.
All right.